Alright, welcome to our last video on the pronoun chapter. We have covered what a pronoun is, what an antecedent is, how to match them up and make sure that they agree, and we've spent the last couple of videos going over various types of pronouns, and now we're going to be wrapping up and finalizing the different types of pronouns. I have a couple of examples here of some of the types of pronouns that you can find on page 406, chapter 20 of your textbook. The first of these is what is called a relative pronoun. Now, we've seen relative pronouns before. Relative pronouns refer to nouns already mentioned in a sentence and introduce a group of words that describe the noun. Now, these various pronouns are who, whom, whose, which, and that. If you remember, we had just used these pronouns when discussing adjective clauses, right? And discussing some of our clauses that rename or describe our subject in a sentence. For instance, tomatoes, which are popular worldwide, were first grown in South America. Again, these are relative pronouns. Which are popular worldwide, this is an adjective clause. Do you remember when we talked about adjective clauses, we said that they had to have a subject and a verb, and they describe the original noun? Well, which is a pronoun. It is a subject pronoun. Are is a linking verb, right? It describes, it connects our noun to our adjective, which are popular. And then worldwide, we have that as well to kind of throw in the geographical scale. All of this, which are popular worldwide, is describing tomatoes. And then you get back to tomatoes were first grown in South America. But these are relative pronouns. These are those pronouns that we've been using in our adjective clauses the entire time. So like I said, you're familiar with relative pronouns. You're much more familiar than you might know of had I just said, hey, here's a relative pronoun. You've seen this in action before. Another type of pronoun is an interrogative pronoun. Our interrogative pronouns are words like who, whom, whose, which, and what. Now, which, who, and whom we've already seen in relative pronouns. A lot of these pronouns overlap with one another. You'll see that the pronoun who, for instance, can be a lot of different pronouns. Even on this slide, it's an interrogative and it is a relative pronoun. So by all means, there's a lot of overlap. The way that you identify is a particular pronoun is understanding how it's used in a sentence. And in this particular case, for an interrogative pronoun, interrogative pronouns are used so when you want to begin a question. Think of an interrogation on the crime drama that you watch on TV, CSI or Criminal Minds or whatever, when the police have a suspect in custody. When the police have a suspect in custody and they drill him with all of these questions: where were you? What were you doing? What were you wearing? Yada, yada, yada. That is an interrogation. And they are interrogating the suspect. They are asking the suspect a lot of questions. You use interrogative pronouns such as what, who, whom, or which, or whose and what. You use these pronouns to begin questions. What did the senator say? Who are you? The who is an interrogative pronoun. Where are you going? Where is an interrogative pronoun. So that is what an interrogative pronoun does. It begins a question. The next pronoun we'll be using is a demonstrative pronoun. Demonstrative pronouns specify which noun is being referred to. And so some of our pronouns are this, these, that, and those. You know those silly clickbait articles that try to get you to click on a web page and read what they have to say? Maybe have a tagline like, use this simple trick to get those stains out. Well, what's the trick? Let me click on it. Click, takes you to a web page. You may or may not get your answer, but it sells advertisements. The use of the word this is using a demonstrative pronoun. What it does is when we say use this simple trick, we're referring to simple trick, not just using a simple trick. We're not saying use a simple trick to get the stains out, but we're saying use this specific simple trick to get those stains out. These bananas are bruised, right? These is a demonstrative pronoun because it's telling us which bananas are bruised. These bananas, those kids are playing. Which kids? Those kids are playing. Those being a demonstrative pronoun. And you don't always have to use them in a subject either. I want to eat this candy. I don't want to eat that candy. I want to eat this candy. These are all demonstrative pronouns. And then, finally, we have reciprocal pronouns. Reciprocal pronouns refer to individuals when the antecedent is plural. So what does that mean? Well, your book has a really good example sentence. My friend and I could not see one another in the crowd. My friend and I, we are a subject together. We're a compound subject, could not see one another in the crowd. We might have also said each other. We could not see each other in the crowd. Each other and one another are our reciprocal pronouns, and they refer back to each of the subject pronouns, or theoretically the object pronouns as well. But these are our list of pronouns that we'll need for this course. There are a couple of other pronouns that we could have discussed in one textbook that I've taught out of. The textbook taught 11 different types of pronouns, but this textbook saw it fit to only worry about 9 pronouns. And again, that all goes back to there are really 3 major pronouns: subject, object, and possessive. But it's good to be familiar with intensive and reflexive and reciprocal and relative and interrogative and demonstrative pronouns as well. So let's move forward. Let's talk about comparisons, because comparisons using pronouns really trip a lot of people up. Bob trusts Donna more than I. Bob trusts Donna more than me. What's the difference in these sentences? Take a second, think about it, jot down your thoughts, and write. Now, if I had just said, Bob trusts Donna more than me, you might think one of two things. You might think that Bob trusts Donna more than Bob trusts me, or you might think that Bob trusts Donna more than I might trust Donna. Well, that's where the consistency in comparisons comes into play. If you are making a comparison, and the comparison is that subject A does something more than subject B, and you being subject B, then you want to use more than I. For instance, there's an implied I trust Donna in this sentence. If we're trying to say that Bob trusts Donna more than I trust Donna, then it would be Bob trusts Donna more than I. It all goes back to implication. Another example that we have is my sister is older than I am. Oftentimes children compare ages. My sister is older than I, or even my brother is younger than I, but that is because there is an implied I am. My older sister is older than I am. My brother is younger than I am. If you can reasonably put am behind the I in a sentence, then you know that what you are comparing, if you can put am behind what you're trying to say, that I am, then you know that you are comparing this subject A to this subject be, right? Here's how it looks on the opposite end. Bob trusts Donna more than me. In this sentence, Bob trusts Donna more than he trusts me. In the above situation, we put am behind the subject. But we can't write Bob trusts Donna more than me am. That doesn't make sense. But that's also not what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is Bob trusts Donna more than he trusts me. You see, it all comes down to what you're trying to compare. If you're trying to compare whether Bob trusts Donna more than Bob trusts me, you can insert that into the sentence. And if you are trying to say that he trusts Donna more than he trusts me, if the implication, if the implied bit that you're trying to take out necessitates using me, then you use me. If the bit that you're trying to take out would come after the pronoun, my sister is older than I am, you're trying to take out that am, then you know that you have to use the I. Now, we're almost done, but we have a who and a whom discussion, and yes, so we have 3 slides left. Let's talk about who versus whom. Who is always, always, always a subject. Popular song, Who Let the Dogs Out? Who is going to the store? Again, we have an adjective clause. John, who is a carpenter, will fix this. Who will always be a subject. So when do you use whom? Well, quite the opposite. Whom is always an object. You gave the ball to whom, right? So whom here is a part of a prepositional phrase, to whom, and it is the object of the preposition. You gave the ball to whom? The pianist whom I saw was excellent. Now, we're going to get back to this one in just a second. For whom should I do the service? Again, we have a prepositional phrase, for whom being the object of the preposition, for whom should I do the service? If you're confused about that, you can reorder the sentence saying, I should do the service for whom, right? This is an inverted sentence. Similarly to the pianist. The pianist whom I saw was excellent. The clause in question, though the verb here is saw, comes after the whom, we know that we need an object pronoun because the clause that we're looking at is the whom I saw. I am doing the action right here. I am the subject. So I saw whom? I saw a pianist. The pianist I saw was excellent. Don't forget who is doing your verb in a sentence, because that will determine what you need to write. So it might seem natural to say the pianist who I saw was excellent, but I am doing the verb here, and I saw whom? I saw a pianist. And then finally, be sure as you are writing to keep your pronouns consistent in person. As soon as a shopper, for instance, as soon as a shopper walks into a store, you can tell it is a weird place. You see, this is awkward because right at the beginning of the sentence, we start off with a third person singular noun, right? A shopper walks into a store. But then we shift into a second person. You can tell it is a weird place. We don't want to mix personhood in a sentence. We want to keep our persons consistent. So as soon as a shopper walks into a store, he can tell it is a weird place. Or, of course, again, we could say, as soon as a shopper walks, a store, she can tell it is a weird place. Or you could even say, as soon as you walk into a store, you can tell ... But of course, we want to avoid using this because we don't want to rely on second person in our formal writing, but it is technically correct.